Well, hello. Welcome to ECC. Thank you so much for being here with us today. If you're watching online or one of our campuses, thanks for joining us. And happy Father's Day to the dads out there. Thanks for being here today. I know there's probably 100 things you could be doing on Father's Day weekend, so thanks for choosing to spend some of it here with us at church. Now, today we're in our Genesis series, and we're really going to be talking about actually the story of Joseph, kind of in the last major story in the book of Genesis. And we're going to be talking about Joseph's life. So we're covering Genesis 37 through 50. Now, with it being Father's Day weekend, I'm going to gear a lot of the message today towards dads. It doesn't mean, though, if you're a mom or you're not a dad, you're a student, you're a kid, whatever, that you're off the hook, okay? Because this is applicable to everybody. But I'm just going to gear some of the application especially towards our dads in the audience. Because I think what we see, like from that video we just watched, dads can really make a major difference in our life. And now some of us have experienced that in negative ways, but many of us have experienced that in positive ways. And either way, dads have the ability to make an incredible impact. I really think actually kind of men in general, when men are willing to step up and get in the game and get involved, they are able to make an impact, often just with their presence. You might understand that. You might have seen that at some point in your life. I know for me, a couple areas I've seen it recently in my life. At our Garden City campus, this is where my family's been going to our Garden City campus on Sundays most of the time. And my son has grown up in church his whole life, right? Well, I've worked here his entire life. He loves this church. And I've never seen him more excited to go to church than we've started going to this Garden City campus. And it's because there's a volunteer there. He serves in our kids ministry. His name is Chris Van Sickle. And Chris is just an awesome dude. He talks every week to my son about the Mariners, and my son comes home and tells me news that I feel like, I thought I already told you that, but now someone cooler told you. But what I love is just seeing the impact, because Chris doesn't do anything crazy, he doesn't do anything special, but he's a male role model in a kids space, which often men are not willing to serve in our kids ministry. And Chris shows up, and we see major impact. Like, my son wakes up every Sunday morning. He's like, oh, let's go. Are we going to ECC Garden City? I'm so excited to get to church today, right? That's kind of impact. I saw it this week, too, at our Central Valley VBS. We were here. There was like 300 or 400 volunteers here, but one of the volunteers was a guy named Nick. And Nick takes off a week of work every year to spend time here at VBS to be like a first grade boys and girls like small group leader, which I'll just tell you, I know a lot of people that we pay that are like, please do not make me be a small group leader. Nick takes off work every year to come spend a week here with his paid time off to spend time investing in kids. And this week, he was here and he was dressed up as Pharaoh on day one, like full head to toe Pharaoh outfit, and the kids thought it was so cool. And I went up to him at the end of the day. I was like, Nick, this is pretty sweet. Like, are you going to do this every day? And he was like, no, I'm not doing this every day. And I was like, yeah, I wouldn't either. And he was like, no, I have a different outfit for every day of the week, right? But it made an impact. And if you could see the kids following him around throughout the week, it was incredible because they just saw a guy who showed up and gave his time and cared enough to be there. And when men show up, they can make incredible impact. And I just want to ask you, as we jump into the message today, what kind of impact do you want to leave? This is for men and women, for adults, for kids. When all is said and done in your life, what is the kind of impact that you want to leave? What's the legacy that you want to leave in your life? Do you want your impact to be, or do you want your legacy to be your income? Or do you want it to be your impact? Do you want your legacy to be the position and prestigious degree that you had? Or do you want to be known as the person who showed up when no one else would? The person who showed up and cared when nobody else did? The person who gave up something like their time to be with someone else? What kind of person do you want to be? I think what you'll find is that most people, when they're reaching the end of their life, what they find is all the money, all the titles, all that other stuff really doesn't matter. I think the thing that matters the most is who you are. Not all the things you did, not all the things you earned, not all the things you bought. It was who you were as a person. And so today, I want to talk about what it looks like to live a life of character. We're looking at the story of Joseph, like I said before, and Joseph was exemplary when it came to character. Joseph had a character that was above almost everyone else that's recorded for us in the biblical text. And so one of the things I want to challenge you to do today is just to consider what the character of your life looks like. And we're going to really just begin by kind of looking at some of the markers of what it is to have a life of character and some of the things that Joseph was marked by. Now, if you don't know the story of Joseph, this is kind of the end of the book of Genesis. We've talked about Abraham, we've talked about Isaac, we've talked about Jacob. Those are the three kind of major patriarchs. And Joseph is the son of Jacob. Jacob is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph is one of his youngest sons. The story of Joseph, though, it's about 14 chapters, which is the same amount that is given to the story of Abraham, who is like the patriarch of our faith. But Joseph's story is about 25% longer than Abraham's story. It's a significant story. Joseph is really looked at as one of the most moral and upstanding characters in the entire Bible. In fact, outside of Jesus, I don't know if there is a more moral or upstanding person that we see in the Bible. So if you're looking for a person to pattern your life after outside of Jesus, obviously Jesus is first, that's who we should look to. But in the biblical scriptures, outside of Jesus, Joseph is probably the best example we have of what it really looks like to live a life of character. And so on Father's Day weekend, that's exactly what I want to talk about. How does it look like to live a life of character? And what are the markers of that? So I have 3 markers for us today of what it looks like to live this kind of life. And the number one thing that Joseph has, in my opinion, is that he is marked by integrity. This is kind of the foundation of everything that Joseph does. Joseph is a true man of integrity. Now, this, like I said, this is a huge story. I'm just going to kind of recap some of it for you. Joseph comes on the scene here in Genesis chapter 37 as a 17-year-old boy. He's one of the youngest sons of his father, Jacob. And he has a lot of older brothers. But Joseph is highly favored by his father. So much so he's kind of given this coat. He's kind of put in charge of his other brothers. He's the son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. So he's highly loved. And because of that, Joseph's brothers are extremely jealous of him. He has this nice coat. He is like the son of the favored wife. He's his father's favorite son. He's given all this kind of favoritism and power and control. And because of that, his brothers decide, we're going to get rid of this kid. We don't really like him. We want to get rid of our youngest brother, so we're going to kill him. Their oldest brother, Reuben, he kind of steps in and he says, no, let's not kill him. Let's just put him in this pit. Reuben has this plan that he's going to come back and he's going to save his brother Joseph. But while Reuben is away, his other brothers conspire and they say, well, there's this group of Ishmaelites that are traveling through the area. And we should just sell Joseph to this group of Ishmaelites. Let's just get rid of him. And so they do. So they sell him to these Ishmaelites. They take his coat that he's been given by his father. They rip it up. They sprinkle blood on it. They tell his dad, they say, Joseph has been murdered. Joseph's been killed. This wild animal came and attacked him, and there's nothing we could do. Sorry about that, Dad. And so Joseph, he goes to these Ishmaelites, and eventually he's sold into the house of Potiphar. He's sold into Potiphar's house, and it's there in Potiphar's house that he is put in charge of everything. Throughout Joseph's life, he continually gets these kind of new positions of power, these positions that he shouldn't really be in by any kind of rational observation. But Joseph is a man of integrity. Because of that, he's rewarded over and over and over again by the people who are in charge of him by putting him in charge of everything else. So he's in Potiphar's house, he's put in charge of everything, and everybody kind of notices how good of a guy that Joseph is, including Potiphar's wife. The Bible records for us that Joseph is also quite handsome. Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Joseph and over again invites Joseph to come and to sleep with her. Joseph, being a man of integrity, though, repeatedly refuses. Here's Joseph's words when he talks to Potiphar's wife. Says he refused. He says to his master's wife, behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house. He's put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Now, notice again, Joseph's marked by integrity. And I want you to notice, Joseph doesn't just say, no, it wouldn't be the right thing to do because I'll lose my job. He doesn't say, it wouldn't be the right thing to do because I love my boss Potiphar. He says, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Now, consider Joseph's life for a moment. Joseph has been sold into slavery by his older brothers and sent off into a foreign land where he knows absolutely nothing. How easy would it be for Joseph to lose his integrity and say, God, you've abandoned me anyway. Who cares what I do? You don't care what I do because you're not even there. It would be very easy for Joseph to shake his fist at God and say, God, you've abandoned me. I'm in a foreign land. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to. But Joseph doesn't. Instead, he submits to God. He does the right thing over and over and over again. Every time Joseph is tempted with the thing that he could do that is wrong, that might be something he would want, he says no, because he says, I am here to honor God. That's integrity. Joseph is who he is regardless of the circumstance that he is in. Because Joseph, again, he has integrity. Now, today, if I could just apply this maybe to you for a moment, today, I think we can see pretty clearly we're a severe lack of integrity in our world. But you don't have to look very far to see that integrity is often missing all over the place in our world. But integrity in many ways is kind of the foundation of a life of character. We often define integrity this way. This is kind of the most known definition of integrity. It's a firm adherence to a code of especially moral or artistic values. And now that is true. This kind of becomes a little bit cliche though. Although it is true, for us as Christians, we hold to a code of moral values that we find in the Bible. This is really kind of the guiding principles by which we live our life. But I want to offer to you a kind of a second definition of integrity. Here's the second one. It's the quality or state of being complete or undivided. That's what integrity is. It's the quality or state of being complete or undivided. Think of this definition like this. When you drive across a bridge, you might think like this bridge is stable. This bridge is secure because all of the pieces are together. We would say a bridge has integrity when all of its parts hold together. So for us in our life, integrity is when all of your pieces move together in the same direction. When all of the parts of you, all the things that make you who you are, when they're all going in the same direction. Now, that doesn't mean that you're perfect, but it does mean that you are who you say you are. And again, we live in a world of people that are not who they say they are. You don't have to look far, do you? You probably see it at work. Maybe you see it in your own family. We see it in our government. We see it everywhere. People try to be one thing, or they say that they're one thing when they're actually not. We even, unfortunately, see it in our pulpits across the country. All the time, I see pastors who have large public platforms and large public followings who do not have integrity. Because they gain this huge following, and then you find out, oh, you've been having an affair for 20 years. It's a crisis. It's a crisis not just in the country, in the world, it's a crisis in our church. And I just want you to know that as a church, integrity is one of the things that we value very, very highly. It's one of the things that we value the most. In fact, on our staff, we have kind of some internal staff core values that we want our staff to do. Integrity is number one. And I want you to know this too. I want you to hear this straight from me. That we have a senior minister, Steve Crane. He founded this church. And like I said, there's senior ministers all over the country who stand up on Sunday morning and say one thing and then live their lives completely differently. I just want you to know this, and he didn't pay me to say this, but he'll probably dock my pay because I did. I want you to know, like I've known Steve for 15 years or more. In my job now, I spend more time with Steve than I probably do anyone else on staff. And I just want you to hear it from me. Steve Crane is exactly the man that you think he is. The man that he is on stage is exactly who he is behind closed doors. Steve, like that, because it's important to him to have integrity, to be who you say you are, to have all your pieces moving together in the same direction. And so integrity for you, I want you to consider, this has to be one of the foundational pieces of your character. And I want you to just consider in your life, whether you're a father or not, who are you when nobody's looking? What do you do when nobody else will find out? What do you do? How do you talk about other people when they're not around? You know, in your life, it might look like having integrity might be walking away from a business deal because you refuse to compromise. Integrity might look like showing up to your kid's baseball game because you said you would, even though it causes you consequences at work. It might be at work. It might be saying, I'm going to leave at closing time because that's when I told my family I'd be home. Maybe integrity for you is working hard when the boss isn't looking, or making your relationship with God a priority because you know it's important. Maybe it's apologizing to your spouse or kids when you're wrong. Maybe it's deciding that you're not going to say that thing online because you wouldn't say it to someone's face. Integrity is all of your pieces moving together in the same direction. And for Joseph, what we see is that his brothers betray him, but he refuses to become a betrayer. Potiphar's wife lies about him, but he doesn't lie or get even. Later, when he's thrown in wife, after Potiphar's wife lies about him and Potiphar throws him in jail, he's forgotten about. But he doesn't allow being forgotten about in prison to allow him to become bitter. Integrity is refusing to let your circumstance determine your character. It's being who you are no matter what is happening, no matter who is around. You are who you say you are, and all of your pieces hold together. They're all headed in the same direction. You know, dads in particular, if I could just apply this to you for a moment, I want you to just hear this. You know, your family, they won't ever know every decision that you make. You probably have a lot of decisions that you have to make in your life, but I will tell you this, they will live with the consequences of your character. For better or for worse, your family, your spouse, your kids, they will live with the consequences of your character. And the reality is, your character cannot be sustained on your own. You are not strong enough to muster up the character that you need to be like Christ in this life. And so that's why Joseph was not just marked by integrity, but he was also marked by dependence. His dependence on God was a thread that ran through his entire life. He wasn't just who he said he was, but Joseph was constantly, completely, and totally relying on God. Joseph, after he goes to prison, his story kind of continues. The chief baker and the cupbearer for Pharaoh, they kind of get at odds with Pharaoh, and so he throws them in prison. And Joseph finds himself in prison in charge of everything that happens. The keeper of the prison says, Joseph, you're going to be in charge of everything. And so he is. And the cupbearer and the chief baker are there, and they tell the prison keeper, we have these dreams, but we don't know how to interpret them. Joseph was a guy who had some dreams earlier in his life that he told to his brothers. And so the prison keeper says, well, you should go talk to Joseph. So he goes and he interprets these dreams, and he tells the cupbearer, he says, you're going to be restored to your position. And when you are, please don't forget about me. Now, of course, he did forget about him for quite some time. He was left in prison. And then he tells the baker, he says, yeah, here's the interpretation for your dream. You're actually going to die in 3 days. Pharaoh's going to kill you for whatever it was that you did to him. And then the cupbearer later, he's talking to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, I had these really weird dreams last night. He says, I saw 7 skinny cows and 7 fat cows, and I have no idea what to do with it, but they're really bothering me. And finally, the cupbearer remembers, he says, I know a guy who can interpret these dreams for you. And he brings Joseph out. Joseph goes to Pharaoh and he interprets the dreams. And Joseph says, well, there's going to be 7 years of bountiful harvest. You're going to get all this stuff. And then there's going to be 7 years of famine. And you better get prepared for it. And Pharaoh's so excited that he's found the man who could interpret his dreams. He says, Joseph, you're going to be second in charge of my entire kingdom. And so Joseph becomes the second most powerful person in the entire Egyptian government. But throughout all of that time, Joseph never once takes the credit for anything that he does. In fact, here's what we see Joseph saying. When he's talking to the chief cupbearer and the baker, he says, do not interpretations belong to God? When he's talking to Pharaoh in chapter 41 multiple times, he says, it is not me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Later he says, God has revealed to Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. When Joseph has the opportunity to say, look, Pharaoh, look what I can do. He can take the power back to his life. He says, I'll tell you your dream if you do this for me. He could take it all back. He could say, look at the amazing things I can do. He doesn't do it. Instead, he says, it's God who does this, not me. And because of that, God continually works in his life. But it's because Joseph understands that he can do nothing on his own, that it all comes from God. You know, in our life, dependence often begins when we are underwater. The moment where we realize, I can't do it on my own. I have nothing else. That's often where dependence begins, where we feel like everything is too much. I realize I can't control my child. I can't control the things that happen at work. I can't do it. I can't make everything good anymore. And those are the times where we often first start looking to God. But those are actually some of the easiest times to look to God. It actually gets a lot harder to look towards God when we are going through easy times. Once things start to get better, then we start to say, look at everything I've done. Look at all the good that I can do. Look at all of the things that I can achieve in this world. And so I want you to consider for a moment in your life, what do you depend on? Do you depend on your strength, or do you depend most often on the strength of God? When things are good, who gets the credit in your own heart and mind? It might be even easy to say with your words, like, yeah, all glory to God. But in your heart, what is it? Is it you? Or do you really depend on the goodness and work of God? Will you place your dependence in God in both the prison and the palace? Because that is exactly what Joseph did. That was a core part of his character. And it was because Joseph depended so heavily on God that he trusted that God had a plan, even in the worst circumstances, being sold into slavery, being put into prison under false accusations, even under the worst moments of his life, he still depended on God. And it was because of that dependence that Joseph could be marked by this last thing that I've identified, which is being marked by mercy and forgiveness. Towards the end of the story of Joseph in Genesis chapter 42, one of the things that we see is that Joseph, he's in charge of doling out the food of Egypt. Anyone who needed food would come before Joseph and make their case and say, and he would decide kind of how much you would get. His brothers are in the land of Canaan where they have nothing. And what it says is that his brothers came and they bowed down before Joseph. Now, if you consider this is Joseph's moment. Think about what Joseph could do to these brothers. He hasn't seen them for years. This is his moment for revenge. You sold me into slavery. They don't even know who he is. They assume that he's dead. He's the second most powerful person in the world, and they're now begging him for food. How easy would it be for Joseph to just say, take these people away and put them in prison forever? Or maybe even to say, have these men taken out and killed. He could do that. No one would even bat an eye if he did. But he doesn't. Because he has integrity, because he depends on God, and because he has chosen the path of mercy and forgiveness. Often we think sometimes that the greatest test of our character is when we face adversity. Well, I think it's maybe just as big of a test of our character when we have power. Who are you when there's no consequences on the table? When no one will bat an eye at anything you do, who would you really be? Joseph could do anything he wants to, but what he chooses to do here is dispense mercy and forgiveness. It goes on to talk about Joseph. He sends his brothers back to their homeland and back a couple times. He's kind of trying to see if they're the same brothers that they were when they sold him into slavery, if they've changed. And finally, he gets to this point in Genesis 45, 1-5, where it says, Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And it tells us there that he then weeps, which shows us that he could have become bitter. He could have become angry. But all these years, he's still tender and forgiving and merciful towards these brothers who did horrific things to him. And then he looks at his brothers and he says, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. He says, it's okay. God had a plan. Can you imagine having that kind of mercy and forgiveness in your own life? Later, the brothers send him a word after their father dies. They think, well, now that our father is dead, Joseph will surely kill us. They make up this story, and they say, please, before our father died, he said that his dying wish was that you wouldn't kill us. They make this story up. And again, Joseph has a chance for revenge. He can say, I'm so sick of you guys, but he doesn't. In fact, what's recorded for us in Genesis 50, verse 21, is he says, so do not fear. He says, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. He doesn't say, away, go to prison. He doesn't send them out. He doesn't have them killed. He says, don't be afraid. He says, I will take care of you and your family. And he comforts them. After everything they've done, he shows them mercy and forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is not just turning a blind eye or sweeping evil under a rug, pretending that it didn't happen. Real forgiveness is a belief that God is a God of justice and that he will bring meaning from it no matter what. That's what it is. It's trusting that God had a plan through it all. And I think maybe one of the strongest things that Joseph ever did is not allow what his brothers did to him to control him. They did horrific and evil things to him. But Joseph said, I'm not going to allow that to make me bitter. I'm not going to allow that to make me angry. I'm not going to allow that to control me. Instead, I am going to put my dependence fully on God and allow God to bring something good out of whatever it is that he has gone through. Now, to dads, again, if I could just apply this to you for a moment, this probably goes to moms as well. But I think there's a reality here that some of the deepest wounds that people have often come from within their families. Some of the deepest wounds that people can get come from within families. But on the flip side of that, I also want you to hear that some of the deepest healing people can receive can also come from a family too. So I want to encourage you today, maybe there is forgiveness you need to seek, or maybe there is mercy that you need to give. And maybe there is something in a dependence on God that you need to let go of and seek forgiveness and mercy and just see what it is that God can do in your life and in the life of your family. You know, the character of the life that we have, it means something. It's significant. We are called to live these lives of character, lives that are marked by integrity and dependence on God in mercy and forgiveness. And I think it's telling the kind of strength that the book of Genesis and the story of Joseph really highlights here for us. The kind of strength that they highlight, that this story shows us, is not the kind of strength that the world tells us we need to have. You go look out in the world, and what the world tells us is we need to have physical strength and financial strength and political strength. But that's not the kind of strength that's highlighted here in the life of Joseph. Here in the life of Joseph, the kind of strength that is highlighted is character strength. It's the character strength to say no when temptation says yes. The strength to remain faithful when quitting would be easier. The strength to depend on God when circumstances make no sense. The strength to forgive when revenge is available. You know, men, dads, I think you know this, but the world is always telling us what we need to be. There is no shortage of messaging about what men need to be. About that there is always someone to conquer. There's always someone to beat. There's always something to win. There's always something or someone to dominate. But you know, when it comes to conquering, the most important thing that you can conquer, especially as a dad, is yourself. Now, this is true whether you're a mom, a dad, a man, a woman, a student, a child. The most important thing we will ever conquer in our lives is ourselves. Joseph had every opportunity to conquer, but he never did it himself. He never did it by himself. And Joseph was able to cultivate this character in his life, but he didn't do it on his own. And the same is true for us. We cannot cultivate the character that we need in our lives through self-help or sheer grit or macho determination as a lone wolf. The way that this character is cultivated in our life is simply through surrender, through dependence on God. And this is true for moms and dads, for men, for women, for everybody. This is the upside down way of the kingdom of Jesus Christ, that we come into wholeness, that we experience that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. And we find it through surrender. You know, the strongest thing that Joseph ever did was not becoming second in command in Egypt. The strongest thing Joseph ever did was refusing to let his heart be ruled by lust and pride and bitterness and fear and revenge. Today, the thing that we need, it's learning how to have ultimate and utter dependence on God. That's what we're called to, is dependence on God. And today, for dads especially, there's a temptation of one of two things. One temptation is to refuse responsibility. That's what I would call passivity, to just let things happen. Let things happen around them, let things happen within them. But the other temptation is what I would call autonomy. It's to refuse dependence on God. But the reality is God didn't create us to do life alone, and he did not create us to do life apart from him. In fact, we can't. We can't do it. We have to understand that we can't refuse the responsibility in our own life that God has given us, but that we also can't do it on our own. And the reality is this, dads, on Father's Day weekend, I want you to hear this. Our families don't need fathers who project invincibility. We need dads who depend on God. Dads who radically and obediently depend on God. And your kid, this is whether you're a mother or a father, your kid is never going to grow up to be the ruler of Egypt. But they will grow up and can learn from you about what it looks like to manage success and disappointment and temptation and suffering and conflict in a way that radically depends on God. Now, the statement I'm about to say is what I want to leave you with, and it's for dads, but it's also for everyone else. The reality of this story is this: the greatest gift that a father can give their family is not what they achieve, but who they become. That's true of you whether you're a mother or a father or not. The greatest thing you can do in your life is not what you will achieve. It's not all the things you'll hoard and buy and do in your life. It's not the positions or the titles that you have. It is the character and the person that you will become. That is the greatest thing you can do, not just for your family, but in your relationship with God and for yourself as well. Joseph's greatest achievement, it wasn't becoming a ruler in Egypt. It was becoming the person who God wanted him to be. So I want to ask you this question, leave you with this today. Who are you becoming? What is the legacy that you are leaving behind today? Is it the things that you do, or is it the person that you're becoming? Let's pray. God, we love you. And God, help us to be people of character, people of integrity and dependence and mercy and forgiveness. Now let us be marked by those things just as Joseph was, and let us live lives of true character, lives that are patterned after you and that are dependent fully on you to do the work within us. So God, we invite you today to do that work within us, to make us new and to build this character inside of us. We love you. We pray this in your name. Amen.